If you're starting to think he's tapping in, then you better be tapping out. Here's your look at the Hiya Toys Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire Exquisite Basic Energized Godzilla. Introducing an electrifying addition to the Hiya Toys Exquisite Basic series, the Energized Godzilla from Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. Delve deeper into the origins of these titans with this meticulously crafted 7-inch tall figure based on the original CG data from the movie. Every detail of Godzilla's imposing form has been faithfully recreated with multiple layers of paint capturing the intricacies of his body. Special fluorescent coatings adorn his dorsal plates and skin, which glow under UV light, simulating the energy coursing through his body after absorbing power, preparing for his next devastating heat ray attack. Yeah, I guess it goes without saying, if you see this guy glowing, you probably should be leaving. Just before, of course, we get a closer look at the new Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire Energized Godzilla. Like if I can, to thank the folks over at Hiya that provided this sample we could have a look at. This guy is actually slated to release in June 2025, so he's about a half a year away. Pre-orders are already showing up online for $50.99 if you're interested to get this one for yourself. Grabbing now, of course, the tape measure, I'm going to measure from the end of the snout to the end of its tail. Now, truth be told, again, you don't have to necessarily have him in this configuration, but I did want to start the reviews as I generally like to do, just to show you guys he has, again, the ability to stand on his hind legs. With that in mind, of course, we're going to start the tape measure in inches, and we're going to go from the front of his face to the end of his tail, and Godzilla is going to be about 14.5 inches in length, or it's going to be about 36 centimeters long. Just turning this guy sideways. If you are familiar, though, with the Hiya Toys Godzilla brand and you already have a couple of those pieces as part of your collection, then you may recognize right away that, in fact, once again, they are using the same mold just to cast here the Energized Godzilla. I'm going to bring in the original, not necessarily the original Godzilla, that's not really fair. I probably have like 5 of these by now, but I did at least want to do apples to apples, oranges to oranges, or in this case, King of the Monsters with King of the Monsters. Actually, you know what, let's just get his legs straight instead of having to worry all this time about getting this guy to balance. They are using essentially the exact same figure. I was trying to look and see the differences between the two, and I can't seem to see any. The dorsal fins are exactly the same. The new colored articulation piece is now, of course, that's been present for a while with the new Godzilla releases, is also there as well. It literally is just a carbon copy with a different deco of paint. Actually, that's not 100% true. One thing, at least, that Energized Godzilla can say that all the others haven't is that this guy does also come included with some swappable hands, which is a bit strange for me to even say that. Godzilla, by nature, generally just tends to have a relaxed pair of hands, but this guy actually does have gripping hands. What he's actually gripping, I don't really know. It almost even just looks like he's mustering up the energy. These hands, by the way, can be swapped out with the ones that he has right now. Again, it's so strange because I've never had to really do this with Godzillas in the past. It's just a case of removing the hands, kind of have to hold on to the forearms, and then just wiggle the hands off the posts. Take the hand that you want to then use, whether you're King of the Monster or not, the thumb rule still applies. And then you're just going to want to twist the hand back in place. Now, I have had some struggle to actually get this properly onto the ball joint. Heating the hand probably would have been the smarter route to have gone. But again, you're just going to put the little bit of pressure and you're going to pop the new hand back in place. Here's honestly speaking, though, I don't know necessarily if there's really much difference. I mean, looking at the two, there's clearly a difference between this being kind of a grabbing hand or a mauling hand, and this being one that actually looks like it's intended to hold something. I know, obviously, there's a difference between the two, but I don't think it's enough, really, to justify its inclusion. I think, if anything, I would have probably used the dedicated plastic to give him some swappable hands. And just as an example, I'm going to bring in a couple of these right now. This obviously wasn't part of the release of this figure. I just happened to have grabbed these from a DC Multiverse figure. I actually would have loved to see, especially this guy being an energized release of Godzilla, maybe including some energy effects. Just things that maybe, for example, you could have wrapped around his dorsal fins, for example. I mean, I'm only, again, like roughly doing this just so you guys can get the idea. I know very well in advance that this figure does not have these. But just kind of picture if you want. Like, look at this, if you will. And just think to yourself, how much cooler would that have been had Hiya just included, like, electricity effects? If it wasn't for this color, I'm sure I probably could have found maybe something with blue. I think that would work really well. I mean, just to intermingle that, wrap them around the fins, for example, I think that would just added some really cool energy effects to Godzilla. Honestly, I would have probably gone with that rather than swapping out a hand, just because it adds a little bit more shelf appeal to the figure. Removing that right now and putting it off to the side. I want to also make sure, too, I've got the hand all the way on there. There we go. So again, if you are familiar with the head sculpt, then you will be automatically familiar with this one as well. I mean, essentially they're taking the body from the original Godzilla, and not even really the Godzilla X Kong release either. They're taking the Godzilla essentially once we've gotten ourselves the adjustable collar piece, because the first release of Godzilla only had a single collar. This now has interlinking links. It allows them, of course, some additional posability there as well. But if you were to look at the figure, it's only really more, again, cosmetic changes really between the two releases. It does, though, grant one other thing to his advantage as well, and that may involve me bringing in a black light. If you take a black light and you shine it all across Godzilla, wouldn't you know it, the figure does glow. It glows on the inside of his mouth. Probably not a good idea getting so close to his mouth like this, but you can see how brightly that glows his teeth, his eyes. And then if you run the light continuous down his body, you can see it also glows. It almost even just looks like he's got like glowing molten lava underneath his skin. Carries nicely also here as well to the dorsal fins. Now this really, again, can only be effectively done if you're using a black light. If you're using just a regular light, you're not going to be getting that same effect, but you can see, though, how well that glows. Very, very cool. One idea I almost even had in mind, I might even just continue with that idea, is maybe looking online to get myself like a little black light bulb. Something that if I do put this Godzilla on the shelf, not a full bulb, not something where the entire room is going to have black light illuminating it, but just a little small, if I can, like a little office lamp, something that just presses a button and illuminates down. If I can find something like that, that is solely just black light. I would love to have this guy displayed, which is that black light illuminating down, or even, if anything, shiny out from the bottom. So again, like if you then had this guy displayed, he would certainly stand out from the crowd with the illumination that this guy now possesses. Of course, for the rest of the figure's body, if you already have a couple of these Godzillas under your wing by now, you already are familiar with all the things that this guy does possess. I mean, I'm not trying to sell this guy short. He's a good-looking Godzilla for what he is, but if you already have a Godzilla for what they are, you're pretty much getting the same idea, which I think, again, it would have been nice if they could have included some energy effects, just so something, again, you could have attached onto the tops of his fins. Running through the figure's now articulation, we're going to start obviously first with his head sculpt. It does move obviously freely back and forth and up and down. I feel, unfortunately, by the sacrifice of losing his eye, I mean, obviously he benefits from having glowing eyes, but you're not always going to have a light source like this shining on his face all the time. Once you really remove it all the way altogether, then I find like maybe his eyes get a little bit lost in the shuffle. I mean, they're there, and at least they're painted differently from all the rest of the body around it. But I feel like it probably could have been just a little bit brighter. That's just my own personal opinion. Now, again, looking at the articulation, back and forth on the head it goes up and down as well. Of course, you can open up his mouth too. There's no hole inside the head to accommodate, for example, like an atomic breath. This guy doesn't happen to have it, but we've gotten Godzillas in the past that have. So again, like he's got that there. He's got now, count it off with me. So he's got 1, 2, and 3 interlocking links. What basically is just like one long post that runs from here to here, and they basically just run around collar pieces. So it does add a little bit more creativity when it comes to posing this guy. So you can move his head up and down, you can move it back and forth. There's only so much, though, that you can do with this much neck. As for the arms, though, they rotate. Well, first of all, you can hinge them outward, but hinging them out, I mean, I'm using that term only loosely. I mean, it comes out to about here. And of course, from there, you can kind of move the arm all the way around if you wanted to. The figure does also have a hinge in the elbow here, so you can bend it there. You can also hinge the arm back and forth. And yeah, you can rotate the hand all the way around. Whether you want to use this hand, whether you, though, want to swap it out with this hand, the hand works the exact same way. The upper torso is going to be on a ball joint, and it's a little harder to accommodate this. It almost feels like you're grabbing yourself a giant lobster and you're trying to separate it at the tail. The top of the torso does rotate back and forth. It only moves just only by a little bit. It moves up and down this way as well, but while you're doing this too, you're clearly going to be pricking yourself with all the spikes sticking out from his body. The back of his legs do split out, but they start basically like that. They go to about that, and then you can also move them, of course, forward and back. The figure does have 2 places in his knee that bend, so there's a point here and there's a point here, so you can move it about that much. Not a lot, but just enough to get the job done. Speaking of getting the job done, it certainly will get the job done better if the figure does have an ankle pivot, and luckily this guy does. Still feel in a way this guy could have probably used pegels and bombs of his feet, so again, if you guys wanted to have him in a walking pose, it's a little easier to pull off if they actually gave himself a display stand. Then when we get to the tail, here's where a whole lot goes on. So the tail itself has, you can probably even see it for yourself, it's probably even easier if you just tilt it on an angle. So every one of these little ledges is a point of articulation. So he moves his tail, first of all, at the main base, back and forth, a little bit up and down. But then each one of these also have their own dedicated level of articulation. So you can move it here, 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 well, again, continue the trend. You'll only really continue the trend till you get to about here. And then this whole last tail piece, this part right here, is all one standalone piece. It's a little bit on the more softer side of plastic as well. So again, like, it has all the same levels of posability. It's a good looking Godzilla though. I mean, I hope, if anything, I'm not underselling how cool the figure does actually look. But if you have already been collecting Godzillas, which again, we'll just bring back in the one that we got specifically from Godzilla X Kong, so it's the closest one in proximity. Yeah, it's essentially this figure, and it's just been painted this way. It does have, again, the selling point, at least if you have yourself a black light, that you can shine it in front and all around Godzilla. So it does look like he glows. And if anything, again, the figure can be having some touting. The fact that he does also include some swappable hands. Now, again, like, this is what we start with. This is what we can go to. I don't know. I don't know if I just would have spent the plastic to produce extra hands like this when, I still feel like I think I would have liked to prefer get electricity effects instead. Now, again, these aren't with the figure. These didn't come included with the figure. I happen to pull them from my tickle trunk of other accessories. But I mean, just think how cool this would have been had they included like these little blue energy effects that, you know, again, if you wanted to, just wrap them around his body like that. And it just looks like Godzilla's just energizing up. That would have been a nice little way, an extra way too, to kind of give the incentive towards collectors that perhaps are maybe on the fence, maybe looking at this and thinking to themselves, well, I already have this guy, and I have maybe another 3 of the guys that look like this. I don't know if that's enough that I want to get a blue version of Godzilla. I still think it's a cool looking design Godzilla for the sense that he does have all this additional blue and the white highlights frosted on the tops of the tips. But again, like, I think one nudge in the right direction would have been in including just extra things that we don't tend to normally see with other Hiya Toys Godzilla releases. While in the end, Energized Godzilla is just a fresh coat of paint on the same old monster mold, at least the figure does look very much different and breaks the mold of what we're used to seeing with Godzilla releases. From time to time, there has been color variations of him, so this isn't the first time that Hiya has done this and experimented with the mold, but I like at least the idea that you can incorporate a black light, if you happen to have one that is, and at least it gives the chance for the King of the Monsters to glow. Now, something I did mention in this review is the fact the figure does include some additional swappable hands. I don't feel like the hands necessarily upcharge this guy to a different price category. At least looking at the listings online, Energized Godzilla is going right now for $50.99. I can't look at that and think additional dollars were added simply just because they added some additional hands. I feel like the price would have stayed the same no matter what. But if they are wanting to use different means of adding extra plastic pieces, I don't know if hands would have been maybe the best route to have gone. Something, though, I mentioned in this review as an idea they could entertain is why not adding energy effects? Just lightning bolts you could wrap around his dorsal fins, around his arms, and hey, why not around his legs? If this guy is getting supercharged, I think that would have also really made a good way if this guy is separating from the rest of the Godzilla crowd. As an idea thinking outside the box, if Hiya Toys want to entertain the idea of doing more molds of this particular Godzilla, why not have accessories that are exclusive to those releases of Godzilla? Maybe think of the idea of adding broken buildings or smaller little things that could be displayed along with Godzilla, that if collectors are looking at this and thinking, I don't know if I need necessarily a blue Godzilla, they can at least be nudged with the idea that this Godzilla is coming with something that hasn't been seen any times before. Now, this guy is slated to release in June 2025. If you're looking at the calendar right now, we're not even into October, and there's still a couple months to go before we get to the end of the year. You got to also tack on 6 months on top of that. But it gives you plenty of time if you want to get onto the pre-orders right now, if you want to get this guy and add him to your collection. A big thank you once again to the folks over at Hiya that did provide this sample of the brand new Godzilla X Kong Energized Godzilla that we had the chance to have a look at in this review. Let me know what you guys think of this guy down below in the comments section. It'd probably be a better idea to ask those that already have been collecting Godzillas from Hiya Toys. If you already have enough of them in your collection, would you be all that interested in the idea of getting this one? And how open would you be to the idea that Hiya include extra accessories with their figures? Broken little buildings, smashed up cars, in this case, energy effects. I think the idea would be kind of cool. If you guys did enjoy this video, do it a solid, throw it a like. You guys want to stick around for more so? I hope so. Hit the subscribe, turn on that bell, and of course come back. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.